Ryan, you have had CNN, not you personally, but CNN has had John Brennan, multiple tape. Welcome to the Young Turks. For those of you watching live, sorry about the very late start. We've got a lot of stories for you guys today, amazing stories. Among them is, of course, what happened at a Donald Trump rally yesterday or over the weekend. And it was a black protester being attacked by basically a mob in Alabama. So that is a very ugly story, an interesting one. And here we go again, fascism on the rise. So that story I'm going to get to in a little bit. I do have encouraging stories for you today too. The counterattack from Wolfpack, and then I've got the Koch organization doing spying. That's coming up in a little bit in this segment. So by all means, let's get to it. Let me start with Mo Brooks. So of course, there's been a raging debate in this country about whether we should take in Syrian refugees and how many. The Republicans overall have been very much against taking any refugees from Syria. Now, of course, remember, these are the people running from ISIS. We claim that ISIS is the worst of the worst modern-day Nazis. But as people are fleeing from them, we won't give them shelter if the Republicans have their way. Now, one of those Republicans is Mo Brooks. He's from Alabama. And he's going to go on a radio show and tell us that these guys are actually just basically looking for welfare. Listen.
And we need to be thinking about the final cost to our country. By way of example, the 85,000 so-called refugees that Barack Obama wants to pay to come to the United States of America, you know what the cost is going to be to American taxpayers? Just in one calendar year, what would be your guess?
I would argue multiple billions of dollars.
Well, it would be in the neighborhood of $1 billion. The president has paid 320,000 refugees to come to America over the past 3 or 4 years, 4 or 5 years, and the cost for that has been a little over $4 billion. Well, that's money we don't have. And we're paying them about $15,000 a year in free health care, free food, free shelter, free clothing, free transportation. Just go down the litany of wealth transfer programs that these people are entitled to. And that answers very quickly why so many of them want to come to the United States of America. We're paying them to come here.
I want to talk about that part here on the other side, but I want to
paid vacation.
It's a paid vacation. The Syrian refugees are looking for a paid vacation. The reference being that they're bums. They want to be, I guess, welfare queens, as the Republicans would call them. Let's look at actual refugees and why they're fleeing. And then we'll see if it looks like they're looking for a paid vacation. Show me the pictures. That's that little boy who washed up on shore. Those are the people apparently looking for a paid vacation, according to Mo Brooks, who has no humanity whatsoever. So this is what they're running from. This is what they're running from. Complete devastation of their country. There's ISIS. There's the brutal dictator Assad. Al-Qaeda is in there. You've got all this enormous fighting and carnage and death. And people don't want to leave their homes. They don't want to leave their homes unless their homes look like that, right? And they're afraid that their kids are going to die. And so they're not looking for welfare, you jackass. They're not looking for a paid vacation. They're looking for a tiny bit of humanity from the rest of the world. We went in there because people like you wanted to go into Iraq and thought it was such a great idea to open that Pandora's box. Oh, Shia Sunni fighting that might come out of it. It's nuance. George Bush said at the time, I don't do nuance. That's a direct quote from George Bush. I don't do nuance. Oh, this is all nuance. Oh, I get rid of the Ba'athist party in Iraq that ran the military. They're not getting paid anymore. Now the Shia, who are their enemies, are running the place. Oh, they might want to become an army and fight against us. Some of those guys are in ISIS now. I don't do nuance. And then after I rip the place apart and these monsters arise out of the ashes, then I go, oh, these people that are leaving, they're looking for paid vacations. By the way, the guy said Obama, quote unquote, let into the country that he's referring to that cost us some money. are people who fought with us in Iraq and Afghanistan, their families. Oftentimes, the fathers who fought with us are already dead, and then we have a tiny bit of decency to let their families into the country because they're on the run. They're on the run from, in Afghanistan, the Taliban, in Iraq, from God knows what, from ISIS, from the Shias, the Sunnis, the different warring factions. These are the people that were on our side, the people we told that we were going to liberate Iraq. Okay? Oh, but Mo Brooks doesn't want to let them in because they're just looking for a paid vacation. There are no bounds of reason on how indecent these people are. So let's go to Mo Brooks one more time so he can tell us who the real enemy is.
I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that this is not radical Islam. This is fundamentalist Islam. You look at the Quran, and I encourage people to read it on their own so they can get a first-hand view of whether these terrorists who are killing non-Muslims are doing what the Quran instructs them to do. And I think you can make a very compelling argument that these terrorists are doing exactly what the Quran tells them to do. And I think you can also make a pretty good argument that there is a large segment of the Muslim population that is not engaged in terrorism, but who is morally in support of what these terrorists are doing. But Barack Obama will try to portray them as people who are not following it. Well, read the Quran or find the passages in the Quran that support what these people are doing. I think you might get a different opinion. And it's been this way for 1,300 years. Look at the history of Islam. How did it expand from a very small religion in two desert towns of Mecca and Medina to be so dominant around the globe? And I think you'll discover that violence was involved in virtually every bit of the expansion beyond Mecca and Medina. And that violence consisted of killing people who did not accept the dictates of that religion.
Well, 13 years of history, because there's a religion that's came out of violence. Now, if we look back at Christian history, no, don't mention the Crusades. Don't mention the Crusades, that was in the past. But he just said 1,300 years of history. Christianity is soaked in blood. Whether it's the Crusades, it's the Spanish Inquisition, and the witch hunts, the list goes on and on. Don't mention the Christian past. Only mention Muslim past. The history of Islam, as he calls it. Okay. Now, wait a minute. He said in there, these guys are attacking non-Muslims. Oh, definitely. They're attacking some non-Muslims. They attack Christians. They attack the Yazidi, which are a sect of their own. Then there's, fighting between different ethnicities, the Kurds versus the Arabs, right? But overwhelmingly, who they kill is other Muslims. Muslims that you claim are on our side. The Republicans who say, I came to liberate Iraq. I came to liberate those Muslims, the ones who are, suffering under Saddam Hussein, etc. What happened? I thought you were going to help them. Oh, it turns out, no, you hate them all. You hate them all. He says that it is morally, even the Muslims who morally support them. In other words, I don't want you to remember, his policy position is, don't let any of them in. They're all Muslim. Don't let them in. Don't let the Muslims in. Okay? He's not saying don't let the radical Muslims in. He's not even saying don't let the fundamentalist Muslims in. He's saying don't let any of them in because they might even morally support those. Where would he have gotten the intellectual cover to make comments about how, hey, even the moderate Muslims give cover to the intellectual arguments about, all moderate, I didn't say all Muslims. Moderate Muslims and other Muslims are responsible because some of them in the polling indicate they agree with some of this ideology. Don't let any of them in. You monsters. The people running from ISIS are Muslim. You see, they're fighting one another, and one side is getting butchered. We want to help the ones that are being butchered because we as America are supposed to be the shining city on a hill. When the Jews were running, and the Poles and the Roma and all those people were running from Nazi Germany, you know what we said at the time? We showed you the polling last week on the show. Same percentage of Americans said, don't let them in, they're Germans, don't let them in. Sometimes they knew they were Jews, they're like, that's even worse, don't let them in. It's a religion we can't trust, don't let them in. Don't let them in. I don't care. They're running from the Nazis, I don't care. If the polling happened in 1939 after Kristallnacht, after we knew what was happening, don't let them in. Don't let them in. So here they are again, Mo Brooks and the monsters that are unfortunately part of this country who say, oh, you're running from ISIS. You're running from ISIS, who we just described as the worst thing on earth, because they are. And he says, I don't care if you're running from them. I don't care if your kids wash up on the shores. Don't let them in. You're all Muslims. You're all Muslims. And when I go to do policy, I will not make a distinction between radical Muslims or regular Muslims, fundamentalist Muslims or regular Muslims. There is no distinction when it comes to policy. Gee, I thought that if you did intellectualizing, that they would do some distinctions. No, they don't do distinctions. They just say, go ahead, keep them all out. They're all dangerous. They're all from this dangerous ideology called Islam. Okay. You think you're a good guy? You think you're trying to help the world? Some of you out there, and you're on Mo Brooks' side. No, don't make any excuses. Don't make any excuses. You are 100% on Mo Brooks' side. If you're not, why aren't you denouncing? I want to hear denouncements. Where are you? Where are you? Are you denouncing Mo Brooks? Okay, no. You secretly love his policy. But for a lot of you who are critics of the ideology of Islam, you're not secret at all. You love this guy. You're like, yeah, screw the Muslims. Not all Muslims, except all Muslims. Keep them all out, right? Okay. And by the way, for the 1,000th time, okay, people who are atheists like us, I happen to be agnostic atheist. There's a lot of different varieties, and a lot of people who work here are in that category. We are against the ideology of Islam because we're atheists. We think it's wrong. I've said 1,000 times, it's 100% untrue. How much more can I be against the ideology? Should I be 101%? Should I be like those football players that didn't give? I would give it 110%. I'm against Islam 110%. Okay. That doesn't mean that you should be against the people. And if you say, I don't know, man, there's the polling that indicates some percentage of Muslims agree with this or that. Okay, so then, hey, they're all kind of guilty. I didn't say all, but I actually did completely and utterly indicate I meant all because I'm grouping them all together. How are you making a distinction? I make a very easy distinction. I say, I'm against the ideology. I'm against the religion. I'm against people who use violence. Okay, and for the vast majority of Muslims who do no such things, I'm not against them. Yeah. Whatever. Okay. Look, for those of you unfamiliar with what's going on, it's hard for me not to get worked up about it. There are a lot of some of you got to be confused because I get all worked up about it, and probably 70, 80, 90% of you don't know some of the background on it. I'll talk more about it in the post-game, but there are people who claim to be rational atheists who are no such thing, who are do a lot of bullshit intellectualizing about how, we do have to discriminate. We have to profile, we have to torture, we have to bomb, we have to do all these different things. Because bombs can really tell the difference between radical Muslims and non-radical Muslims, right? When you drop a bomb, it only kills the radical Muslims, right? So anyway, it's a long story. But there are people out there who pretend to be people of reason, who actually are completely against, in a blanket way, against Muslims in the world, while pretending not to be. And then secretly, and sometimes completely not secretly, loving the things that Mo Brooks does. People like Mo Brooks. Well, you wanted to profile him. He's profiling him, right? He's profiling him and keeping them all out. Congratulations. Nice job. Okay. All right, let's move forward. Okay. So, the Pentagon Inspector General is looking into intelligence, or lack thereof, at the Pentagon. And this is referring to United States Central Command. They are doing an assessment of whether they basically doctor the reports, the intelligence, to tell us that things were going better in our fight against ISIS than they actually were. Now, we know about this already from over the summer when a lot of the analysts that were in basically doing the actual work, but not at the very top end, called out the top end and said, "Hey, listen, there was about 50 of them said they're changing our intelligence. We're not saying that we're winning. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying do these solutions. We're not saying these solutions work. But when it goes up to the top, all of a sudden things get changed around." And what do we hear? Oh, we're making progress. Well, we're not making progress. So, New York Times has a news story about it. They explained that they had comical rewording of some of the intelligence. Remember when ISIS attacked large cities in Iraq and the Iraqi army just dropped everything and ran? We showed pictures of their uniforms in the streets, right? They explained in the New York Times in the revised documents, the Iraqi army had not retreated at all. The soldiers had simply, quote, redeployed. They redeployed right the hell out of town, right? I mean, you want to talk about a euphemism. Okay, so they continue to explain, such changes are at the heart of an expanding internal Pentagon investigation of CENTCOM, as Central Command is known, where analysts say that supervisors revised conclusions to mask some of the American military's failures in training Iraqi troops and beating back the Islamic State. The analysts say supervisors were particularly eager to paint a more optimistic picture of America's role in the conflict than was warranted. So we spent all that money, and all these generals, remember the Republicans will bow down to the generals, but you got to listen to the good generals on the ground. Generals on the ground, right? Well, it turns out the top generals were lying. They say, oh, that money you spent on training the Iraqi army, well done. Well done, they're great. Well, it seems like they lost half of Iraq, but no, they redeployed. They redeployed from that half of Iraq, right? And so how about all the money you spent bombing the hell out of ISIS? You told me you were making progress on that. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so more from the reporting. This past summer, a group of CENTCOM analysts took concerns about their superiors to the Inspector General, saying they had evidence that senior officials had changed intelligence assessments to overstate the progress of American airstrikes against the Islamic State, also known as ISIS. So, the military strikes are not working as well as advertised. Gee, I wonder who said that before. You see, the reason we said it is because we have eyes. We can read, we can see the videos, we see the cities falling. So the rest of the press was out there dutifully reporting what the Pentagon told them, and the Pentagon kept telling them, oh, we're making progress, airstrikes. The answer is more bombing, right? But I came out here and told you, wait a minute, they just lost all these cities. If the bombing was working so great, why do we lose the cities, right? And then they told us that we were going to retake those cities when we did even more bombing. Okay, that was the point of more bombing, right? Well, we didn't retake the cities. We didn't retake them, okay? And every once in a while, the Pentagon would declare we're making great progress, and then you look into the details, and none of it was true. But the rest of the press, oh, no, the Pentagon says it. I can't question. Finally, 50 analysts come out and go to the Inspector General and go, please stop lying about this. Finally, the rest of the press, New York Times leading here, going, it turns out, Pentagon. Congratulations, you figured out the Pentagon might not always be telling the truth. This is news to the rest of the news organizations. Okay. The analysts said the problem in Iraq were rooted in deep political and religious divides that could not easily be solved with a military campaign, current and former officials have said. Yet CENTCOM's official posture remained generally upbeat. Okay. Now, don't forget that part, because later they will whitewash that part out of the report. Okay? So the people that are now in Congress trying to investigate this are Republicans. Why? Some Democrats say, yes, this is very serious stuff. We'll investigate later. Are they covering up for Obama? Probably. Are they, some of them legitimately saying, hey, let the Pentagon do their Inspector General findings first, and then Congress get involved? Probably some of them genuinely believe that. It's a mix, right? But Republicans leading the charge here. But later, because it's the Obama administration, it's easy, right? Yeah, Obama, you screwed everything up, yes, right? Here, let me give you a quote from Representative Mac Thornberry, Republican of Texas. He said, anytime there's an allegation that intelligence is being shaved in a certain way or distorted in a certain way, that's a cause for serious concern. Now, he was not that concerned when the Republicans mangled intelligence in the lead up to the Iraq war. In fact, it was the same analyst complaining. Here, let me show you that part. New York Times says that investigation was prompted by complaints this past summer from CENTCOM's longtime Iraq experts led by Gregory Hooker, the senior Iraq analyst. In some ways, the team's criticisms mirror those of a decade ago when Mr. Hooker wrote a research paper saying the Bush administration, over many analyst objections, advocated a small force in Iraq and spent little time planning for what would follow the invasion. It turns out what followed the invasion was complete and utter disaster, right? But back then, Republican congressmen, no, don't investigate political. This is political. This is outrageous. How dare you investigate the president? We're in the middle of a war. Don't investigate, right? Now he says, oh, we would always investigate. Okay, but look, that hypocrisy is obvious. Anyone who is in mainstream media can see that immediately. And both sides played, depending on who the president is. Yes, the Republicans played more. Yes, they're more brazen about it. Okay, that's not the part that I'm giving you a heads up on. I'm giving you a heads up on when the Republicans come out with their report, whoever else comes out with their report, they'll talk about, oh, this guy was wrong for changing a couple of words. They shouldn't have touched up the intelligence. They'll say that stuff. But the part where we say the military campaign is not the answer, it's not the long-term answer for political and religious divides that exist inside Iraq, that part's going to get washed out. Because the answer is always the military. See, Thornberry and the other Republicans, they haven't gotten the memo yet. So right now they're just in their reflexive Republican mode. Attack Obama! It's Obama's fault! Thanks, Obama, right? So in this case, when they talk about the administration doing this wrong, they're right. I mean, the CENTCOM is within the administration. Obama's the commander-in-chief. So I agree with them on that, right? Later, their donors, who are defense contractors, will send them a memo saying, hey, you know that your investigation on the Pentagon, sure. But all that talk of the military campaigns and the airstrikes not working, let's tone that down. That doesn't seem very patriotic. And then all of a sudden, Thornberry, with his loud mouth, will not be around to talk about how the airstrikes didn't work. That part will get left out. You mark my words. I told you that all his airstrikes weren't working in the first place. It turns out I was right, and the intelligence analysts agreed with us, and not with the establishment position. And I'm telling you right now, ahead of time, when all is said and done, the part that is the most important here, which is that the airstrikes and the military campaigns are not the right approach, will not be a central part of the report. Okay? They're saying it now because they didn't get the memo from donors yet. Later they'll get the memo from donors, that'll get washed out, and even when the rest of the mainstream media covers it, big headlines about, oh, redacted this, or one person or two people a few bad apples were wrong, they shouldn't have changed those reports. So what are we going to do going forward? Oh, more airstrikes and more military campaign. That's exactly what will happen. You'll see. Okay. Speaking of donors, I got two more stories in that regard. Uh-oh, here comes the cough. I'm about to do a story on Marco Rubio, so this is very appropriate. Okay. By the way, he looks like a hostage there. No, he's supposed to be in a pool of money playing Marco Polo. Okay. New York Times with an editorial about Senator Rubio's stealthy donors. Now, Marco Rubio, as I'll show you at the end, claims that he's all for transparency. He wants you to know who his donors are. Now, it turns out... and they are a tax-exempt social welfare organization. Now, what are social welfare organizations supposed to do? They're supposed to, quote, promote the common good and general welfare of the people of the community as a whole. Now, are they doing that? No. If you get rid of public financing and you let private interests, whether they're corporate interests or really rich people, finance elections, the politicians will work for the people financing them. Oh, why didn't we think of that? Except they did think of that. That's why they set the system up just like this, so they could take legalized bribes. So let's dive a little further. Now, technically what they're doing violates the law, because these social welfare groups are supposed to spend a majority of their money on general social welfare for the community. Now, they started out pretending to be 51% in favor of the community and spent 49% on political ads. Now they realize, oh, we crushed the IRS. All the Republican fake scandals about the IRS worked beautifully. Now the IRS is coward. Earlier, the FEC came out, Federal Election Commission, who also is under attack, who is split up, Republicans voting no on every investigation, right? Saying, we will not investigate any of these social welfare groups. Have at it, Hoss. Have at it, Hoss. IRS isn't going to look into you. The FEC isn't going to look into you. So now they dropped all pretenses of spending 51% of the money. They're spending all the money on the ads, on political attack ads, okay? So as the New York Times explains, it violates the law. The groups complained. Now these are actual social welfare groups, political groups that fight against money in politics, that look at the actual information and the actual laws. They say it violates the law by providing a private benefit for a partisan campaign, featuring Mr. Rubio and nobody else in thousands of television ads in the early primary states of Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, all paid by the Conservative Solutions Project. Okay, isn't it funny that if it's really a general welfare group, that it only cares about the welfare of the people in Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina? What a coincidence. And their welfare would definitely be promoted only by electing Marco Rubio. This is such a sham. Okay, Times explains, yet the group has underwritten $5.5 million in pro-Rubio ads this year that have not cost the official Rubio campaign a dime. So Rubio can just say, oh, I didn't do it, man. Look at this super PAC spending millions of dollars in the primary states to tell people how wonderful I am and how much the other guys are terrible. Huh. That is great for the general welfare. But I thought you guys were against welfare. Okay. By claiming social welfare status, which it clearly does not deserve, referring to this group, the group can keep the identity of its donors secret from voters. Okay, that's awesome. So not only do they spend all this money, which are just most obvious bribes in American history, right? And they only do it for Rubio, and they violate the law doing it, but you can't tell who it is, because it's dark money. The social welfare group allows it to not disclose their donors. So we'll get to Rubio's thoughts on that in a second. But don't get me wrong, it's not just Marco Rubio. He's a particularly egregious case, right? And it's not just the Republicans. Democrats also do. Now, the Republicans do it on a larger scale, so we're not calling it 50-50, but definitely the Democrats do it as well. It's the system that we have now. So both sides are bathed in corruption. The Democrats, as the Times explains, worked from the social welfare shadows last year in campaigning for the Senate, collecting half of the $30 million in dark money raised by the group Patriot Majority USA from just 5 anonymous donors, according to the Center for Public Integrity Watchdog Group. Okay? So, yes, the Republican side has a lot more money, it has more donors, and they keep them secret. But the Democrats still do the same thing, they just do less of it, right? Not because they're better people, but because the rich people don't want to bribe them as much. Right? Now, a lot of times, people who give to Democrats give it for their self-interest. Some of the time, they give it against their self-interest. They say, you should raise my taxes. On the Republican side, it's completely for their self-interest. So they go in and they go, I'm for more freedom, which means lower taxes on billionaires for me. Okay? I'm for more freedom, which lets me pollute your rivers and your oceans and everywhere else so I can save some money. Isn't that funny how my freedom agenda winds up making me billions of dollars? So that's the reason why Republicans get more money, because it's in the self-interest of giant corporations and very wealthy people to give the Republicans, who will return them favors that will make them even more money, right? But would I stop the Democrats from getting dark money? Hell yes, I would. You got to get all of that money out. Get the Democratic money out. Get the Republican money out. Get it all out. Look, we can publicly finance elections. People say, oh my God, you'll spend a nickel and a dime if you finance elections through people's taxes. You'll save trillions on the other side, because then they can't take bribes anymore. What campaign money are you going to run out? The one that you get from public financing. That's it. Okay? Now you want to have a real battle of ideas? Go ahead. One side can't buy a megaphone that's much larger. They can't buy all of the TV ads, all the ads online.
one side can't drown out the other side. Let's do elections like, by the way, so much of the rest of the civilized, developed world, they figured it out. If you let private people finance your elections, they'll buy all the politicians. It's the most obvious thing in the world. Now, one of the guys pretending to be on our side is Marco Rubio. He says, as long as you know who's behind the money and how much they're giving and where they're spending it, I think that's the sunlight that we need, he told a New Hampshire voter earlier this year. Your donors are hiding in the dark. You're going, Marco. They're like, Polo. Marco Polo. And so all of a sudden, when you say Marco, they show up with $5.5 million of ads. Polo. Okay, that's how it works. They're all in the dark, and you love it. You hypocrite. So if you're a guy who's the beneficiary of this kind of corruption, you're not against it. Marco Rubio loves the corruption. He loves the dark money. He hates the spotlight. That's why he gets all this money. And all of his policy positions say, oh, keep it going, keep it going. I love billionaires financing my election so I can give them lower taxes. I mean, freedom of speech. I think they have the right to speak. But they're not speaking. We don't even know who they are. They're just giving you millions of dollars. Speech. I think it's speech. Yeah, I'm sure you do. And the corruption. Wolf-pac.com. Clean them out. Republicans, Democrats. Okay, get them out. Get the money out. Okay, these guys are all living in corruption. They were born in it. Okay, so clean house. Clean house. Wolf-pac.com. Come feel the power. All right. Now, you think that's bad? Let's go to the Koch brothers. Now, for those of you who are worried that we started the show a little late, don't worry. You're going to get your money's worth because I had a lot of show for you. We're nowhere near halfway through the first hour, let alone what else we're doing. Okay? Okay. Politico magazine with a very good article from Kenneth Vogel about what they call, quote, the Koch Intelligence Agency. Okay? This is an intelligence group they have set up within the different groups that Koch brothers contribute to. And their job is to spy in on liberals. Okay, let's give you the details. The political network, helmed by Charles and David Koch, has quietly built a secretive operation that conducts surveillance and intelligence gathering on its liberal opponents, viewing it as a key strategic tool in its efforts to reshape American public life. So they've got a little intelligence group within the labyrinth of groups that they have set up, and I'll tell you about those in a second, whose job is to make sure that they spy on the other side so they can reshape American public life, which they've done a pretty good job of. They reshaped it to the tune of lower taxes for themselves, less regulation on their pollution, on their financial speculation, what they would call their freedom agenda, as they take freedom away from us and put it in their pocket. Okay, the competitive intelligence team, as they call it, has a staff of 25, including one former CIA analyst. So if you're mega multimillionaires as the Koch brothers are, you can afford a staff of 25 to spy in on your opponents. That's how you're going to crush them, right? Politico continues to explain. It also sends a regular intelligence briefing, emails tracking the canvassing, phone banking, and voter registration efforts of labor unions, environmental groups, and their allies, according to documents reviewed by Politico, and interviews with half a dozen sources with knowledge of the group. So not only are they tracking them through the web, and not only with public information, I understand looking at public information, generally nothing wrong with that, okay? So, but they're canvassing and apparently infiltrating their groups. So let's go to that point. The competitive intelligence team has gathered on-the-ground intelligence from liberal groups canvassing events in an effort to assess the technology and techniques of field efforts to boost Democrats, according to the sources. And they say the team utilizes high-tech tactics to track the movement of liberal organizers, including culling geodata embedded in their social media posts. They're on the ground. They've, according to some sources, infiltrated some of the groups, and they're looking at their geodata to figure out where they are, okay, and where they're moving. Now, they think they're above the law. They run this country. They've kind of set up their own little CIA, and they are here to track their political opponents, and I don't know what they do with them next, right? I mean, they learn from them. I get that part, right? And they make sure that they know how to oppose them and flood them out with money. Oh, you're going to help a Senate campaign in Wyoming? They're going to come in and run a bunch of ads in Wyoming. I understand that part, right? But they're in our lives now, right? Now, look, I don't know if they're spying on us. I'd be surprised. Because whether, I see on Turk's a media organization, but I also founded Wolfpack. Wolfpack wants to get money out of politics. We're fundamentally opposed to the Koch brothers buying all of our politicians. But we're not a big Washington group. So these guys track the Washington groups. The Washington groups that largely do nothing anyway. Okay, have at it, hosts. Oh, they're still sitting on their ass. That's interesting. Okay, now, being a little unkind there. We're out in the field, and they did see us in New Jersey, where they opposed our effort to get money out of politics, and they lost. I don't know, maybe they should track that. Okay, we won in our resolution to get a convention to get money out of politics in New Jersey, as well as some other states. Okay, now, but they think they can do this with impunity. They think it doesn't matter. I'll track all these liberal groups. They'll cower in fear. They don't have the money that we have, and maybe one day they'll track us. They'll track Wolfpack, etc. But I'm going to caution them now. Okay, because you're used to intimidating and bullying everybody else. You're used to running your intelligence operations against us, and progressives aren't supposed to do anything back. Now, Wolfpack is nonpartisan. There's really strong Republicans, Libertarians, Conservatives in the group because they hate the corruption of our system. They hate the crony capitalism. They hate the legalized bribery as well. You want to track us? Then maybe we should track you. Oh, but that's uncomfortable. But how would we track you? We can't afford the things that you have. Well, now they're going to spend $889 million in this election. That's what they brag about, okay? Let me get to how we're going to track them in a second. Let me give you more news about them that's relevant to this, and then I'll tie it back in. The Koch network of nonprofit groups and for-profit companies can accept unlimited cash without disclosing donors and faces few spending restrictions. Well, it seems like you're ripe for tracking since we don't even know who the hell you are. You know who we are. We don't know who you are. You're dark donors. We know the Koch brothers, but the Koch brothers are the ones collecting that $900 million from other enormously rich people. Okay? Maybe we should find... You're interested in finding out about us. Well, we're interested in finding out about you. Okay? They had a seminar. They had a get-together. They do it at fancy hotels. They happen to do one in Southern California, Dana Point, the St. Regis. And they had a little get-together called The Opposition, Understanding Their Strategy and Infrastructure. Right? Sounds a little vaguely military, but that's okay. No problem. Everybody tracks each other. Like, if you're just looking at, hey, what's in the public domain, what is the Democratic strategy or liberal strategy or progressive strategy, etc., that would be no problem at all, okay? But as I told you, they're getting into people's personal lives. The competitive intelligence team is run by a veteran Republican researcher named Mike Roman, who is listed as Freedom Partners Vice President of Research, that's funny, on the tax filing the group publicly released on Tuesday. That filing cites Roman's salary and benefits at $286,000 last. Okay. So now we don't have a guy to pay $286,000 to, and we don't have all these groups. So they launder the money through a great number of groups they've set up. Each of these costs a lot of money, so you can't track where the money's coming from. Hey, if you guys want to do this on behalf of free speech, because that's what I hear from you guys all the time. You use to cover the First Amendment to pretend you're on the side of the Constitution, and you say, oh, no, this is my speech rights to spend all this money. Well, if you'd like to speak, we'd love to hear from you. Who are you? The reason they launder the money is because they don't want you to find out who they are, because they're not interested in speech, they're interested in bribery. They are the kings of crony capitalism. Okay, so it starts with Freedom Partners, and as Politico explains, and you can read the article, we'll have the link down below for you guys. It is funneled through ASG, and then, I love this one, CAVHOCO, just to make it a little bit more confusing. What the hell is that? No one knows. Okay. one of these groups, ASG, where they run the main intelligence operation from, you can't even find their office, even to their friends. You get lost in a labyrinth of offices in like a mini mall or something. And then when you're like, hey man, I couldn't find you, they're like, exactly. These guys are the ones interested in transparency? Okay. Then you've got Demeter Analytics Services Incorporated. Then you've got I360, whatever that is. Then you've got, I love this name, Public Engagement Group Trust. Okay, all these Orwellian names. So, at a bare minimum, what can be tracked is that they've spent about $13.3 million on these intelligence operations alone. Again, remember, going to spend almost $1 billion on just the 2016 campaign. Now, these guys complain, the left has their guys who are funding the Democracy Alliance. And Politico points out Democracy Alliance has given $500 million. Wow, that's a lot of money over 10 years. The Koch brothers are about to give almost twice that in 1 year. Okay, in their group. Who's in their group? It's dark money. You can't find out. We fixed all the laws. We bought all the politicians. We fixed all the laws on our behalf. Okay, so wait, if they have all the money, what do we have? How can we track them? Well, you see, David, Charles, we have people. You have money, we have people. Okay? So I can't afford a $286,000 guy. I can't afford $13.3 million. Wolfpack is funded completely by individuals that are citizens of this country. They give $5, $10 at a time. You probably get a good laugh out of that. That's all the donations. The Wolfpack, what are they going to do? They're not going to do anything. Well, look, right now, to my knowledge, we're not being tracked at all, so I'm not taking it personally, okay? But if we are tracked, well, obviously we're going to have to track you back. That's fair, right? Isn't that fair? If you track us, we track you, right? I think you'd find that fair. So how would we track you? Well, we could have people walk you from your building to your car. And then maybe drive along with you. And then walk you from your car to your office. Oh, you don't like it when you're tracked. You think you get to bully everyone else and do it with impunity. That you run the country. You own the country. But I got news for you. You don't own the country. People who join Wolfpack, they realize that they've got power. They used to call it people power back in the day, right? Well, that's literal. Okay? But we're not trying to hide anything. We're not like you guys. Okay? So one time, a long-time political group in Washington threatened us and said, what if we go after your donors? Have at it, Hoss. Go find Bob in Nebraska who's giving me $5 a month. Okay. And they assume that we have billionaires behind us. We don't. We just have the American people behind us. And we're on the side of peace. Okay. There's nothing physical whatsoever. Anybody anything does physical, we kick them the hell out. That's not what we stand for. We stand for doing things the right way. Okay. A political revolution. Okay. So I would never, ever, ever get physical with the Koch brothers or anyone else, no matter how disgusting they are and how much corruption they've brought into the system. And we'll wear shirts if you like. It'll say Wolfpack, so you'll know who we are. That's a lot more decent than what you're doing. So all this makes you uncomfortable, right? And by the way, the mainstream media will hate us for this, because they're the protectors of guys like this. Joe Scarborough will lose his mind. Oh my God! I had tea and crumpets with the Koch brothers. They were so lovely when they invited us to their hotels. But wait, why do they get to track us? Why do they infiltrate our groups? And you're fine with that. Nobody does anything about it. You think there's going to be any consequence for this? No. They're looking at our phones and figuring out where we're moving. Why can't I figure out where they're moving? No. It has to be one-sided and you have to bow your head. No. We don't bow our head. That's not what we do at Wolfpack. We're the ones who knock. So if you don't like that, well, get your money out of our politics. Okay? Stop buying all of our politicians and doing it in the dark. And then we won't have any problems at all. If you want us to be consistent, we're more than consistent. That's why we have Republicans and Libertarians in our group. Because we'll get the Soros money out. We'll get the Democracy Alliance money out. We'll get the union money out. We're not interested in anybody corrupting our politics. And if you're against crony capitalism, as you claim Charles Koch in that interview with Scarborough, you'd be on our side. But these guys, they have the audacity, after spending nearly $1 billion to buy politicians, to think that they're the underdogs. This is what they said in a tape that they found from their get together. Mark Holden, who's their legal and policy advisor, said, and it's the old quote: "First they ignore you, then they mock you, then they attack you, and then we win." What are you, Gandhi? You're the ones that are powerful. You're the billionaires. He says, we're close to winning. I don't know how close, but we should be, because they can't attack the ideas. Well, I got bad news for you, Mark. They don't have the real path. All they do is target, and they just try to silence people. Exactly what they're doing. You know they're afraid of us. They really are. They're afraid of this room. Well, that part is true. A lot of people are afraid of you guys, because you're the multimillionaires and the billionaires buying our government, and we'd like to change that. So please don't play it off like you're the underdog. You are the establishment. You are the people who have controlled the system for a long, long time. But we're done with that. Okay? We're coming for you in a political way. Okay? We're going to change it state by state. We're going to make sure the Constitution stands up for us. It already does. We're already on the right side of it. But they bought the Supreme Court. They've got 5 justices who say, oh, I think the Constitution says that you should be able to give unlimited money to politicians. The Founding Fathers would be rolling in their graves. You want to talk about an activist court that has mangled the obvious plain reading of the Constitution? If you're a conservative brother, you got to be with us. Look at what they did. They wrote in bribery into the Constitution with these justices that they bought, through the politicians that they bought. So come and join us, wolf-pack.com. We're not the group that stands by and lets them do this. Okay, we're the ones that are going to get their money, all their money, out of politics. And we're going to make sure that the politicians represent us, the actual American people. Then we'll have wonderful debates between liberals and conservatives and libertarians. We'll all debate about policy instead of figuring out whose politicians get bribed more effectively. Come and join us. Feel the power. We're not going to let them get away with it. wolf-pack.com. Young Turks. All right, back on the Young Turks. Doc Daniels writes in on hashtag TYT Live. That's how you talk to us on a normal day. Through Twitter, I get your comments. Not hard to figure out who you're talking about. Pseudo-intellectualism, couching religious bigotry, and other old bad ideas. I didn't say anything. Davos Seaworth says, whatever happened to Khorasan? You know, the group that Pentagon said was worse than ISIS? God damn it, Davos, that's such a great point. Get that man a t-shirt, right? Remember I told you there was, we started the bombings by bombing a group called Khorasan that was worse than ISIS? And I said, bullshit. There is no such group. They made it up. And I explained and I proved how they made it up, right? And I'm curious how we never heard about Khorasan again, right? Every day CNN comes out there, the Pentagon, which is a story I'll get to later. The Pentagon's always right. How dare you question the Pentagon? Jake in the boiler room writes in, it's difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. Quoting Upton Sinclair. Okay. Well, that describes every politician in the country at this point with the legalized bribery that we have. That's a great old quote. Thank you for bringing it back up. John Connor writes in, why do I think the Koch brothers have a long-haired white cat that sits on their lap? Or perhaps with no hair at all. And A.A. Lipschitz says, TYT has techies in the audience that has TYT's back. Oh, we appreciate that. We'll see if it comes to that. Okay, now, I will, if you thought the last segment was heavy, wait till you get a load of this one. Except, I will start with some very good news first. Let's go to Louisiana. David Vitter was running for governor. He's the sitting senator in Louisiana. And, he had some issues in his past with prostitution scandal that he admitted to. And then there was a prostitution scandal specifically in Louisiana that he didn't admit to, which had some interesting details. So he nonetheless brazenly ran his campaign again on family values. Now, it wasn't working. He had to go to a runoff. And in fact, in the first round of voting in Louisiana, he was losing to Edwards, who is his Democratic opponent. Now, Edwards is a conservative Democrat in Louisiana, so Vitter thought, well, the family values thing isn't working that well. The runoff is coming up, and it was this weekend. So let me go to my Republican bag of tricks and run some good old fear-mongering ads where we tell you that the Syrian refugees are coming for you. So let's watch that ad.
One of the Paris ISIS terrorists entered France posing as a Syrian refugee. Now, Obama's sending Syrian refugees to Louisiana. David Vitter warned Obama the dangers of Syrian refugees weeks ago and promised as governor, no Syrian refugees will enter Louisiana. John Bel Edwards has pledged to work with Obama to bring Syrian refugees to Louisiana. On the board of the president, he always does.
John Bel Edwards, a Democrat. Actually, he's a human being who cares about other human beings. Let's go get him. Sorry to report, David Vitter, it didn't work. The good people of Louisiana over the weekend decided to drop the people's elbow right on top of Vitter's head. Boom! 56-44. John Bel Edwards, the Democrat, will be your new governor in Louisiana. It has not been a good week for Louisiana Republicans. First, Bobby Jindal saying, who was I kidding? Of course, I'm running for president. Not even close. I gotta go. I gotta go get rest and tan. And then now, here he is, David Vitter, Vitterman himself. He thought it was going to be a cakewalk. All the analysts and the pundits said, Vitter's got this locked up. In Louisiana, the Republicans are definitely going to win. Instead, over the weekend, they had to report.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Yeah! Down goes Vitter! Down goes Vitter! That's what caused the problem in the first place. Okay. He went down and he never got up. Well, the good news for David Vitter is now he'll have plenty of time for prostitution. Okay, so that's that. Now we finally get to Trump. A while back, Bernie Sanders' speech was interrupted by Black Lives Matter protesters, and he actually had the temerity to let them talk. he was being respectful to the protesters. Donald Trump doesn't roll that way, and at the time, he told us that if anyone tried to protest him like that, including Black Lives Matter, it would end up differently. Listen to what he said back then.
I would never give up my microphone. I thought that was disgusting. That showed such weakness. The way he was taken away by two young women. The microphone, they just took the whole place over. And the audience, which liked him, I mean, they were him. They're saying, what's going on? How can this happen? That will never happen with me. I don't know if I'll do the fighting myself or if other people will. But believe me, that's not going to happen to Trump.
I'll do the fighting myself or other people will. Well, we have a pretty good sense of who's going to do the fighting now. This happened over and over again in Trump rallies. It happened again over the weekend in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm going to show you that video in a second. But let's give you proper context here because the rest of the media isn't doing it. This is not the first time. Remember, a protester was spat upon in another Trump rally. Here, if you don't remember, here's a tape on it. Now, that started getting physical. So the man who was spit upon was incredibly restrained there. I don't know if I would have been likewise. Good for him. And then there was the two idiots up in Boston who beat the hell out of a Latino homeless guy, thinking that he wasn't a citizen, and they said they wanted to support Trump. Trump afterwards said, hey, some of my supporters are enthusiastic. Okay. So the Boston guys were not at a rally. But now you got the spitting at a rally. Remember, there was another man who was beat up at a Trump rally. Again, everybody's forgotten this, but it just happened about 2 weeks ago. A Latino guy was protesting at a Trump rally. They knocked him down and they dragged him out. If you don't remember, take a look at the video. We were worried at that time that was the beginning of fascism, as this man is clearly being assaulted, and they're chanting USA, USA. As to the best of my knowledge, we asked for the authorities to investigate that and arrest the guy who clearly assaulted him on tape, and they have done no such thing. So, now Trump is in Alabama over the weekend, and there's a Black Lives Matter activist, and he's protesting, and you hear Trump in the background say, quote, get him the hell out of here. And they do, but not before seriously assaulting him. Now let's go to the videotape. You'll see that the man has already been knocked down when the tape begins. Now, understand, from time to time, people get escorted from rallies. It happens, right? The authorities are supposed to do that, and they're supposed to do it calmly. And as you saw the first video where the Latino guy was attacked, there was another Latino guy, and he put up his arms and was walking away with the authorities so that he was not attacked, right? Now, in this case, I don't know if you can tell, but it looked like the gentleman involved here, Mercutio Southall, did put up his arms in the distance. before he was knocked down. But this is not the authorities leading someone away. This is several people assaulting a guy. And as you'll see here, Southall says that he was punched and kicked and choked. So you know that that's partly true because you see an unknown woman, you hear her in the CNN tape saying, quote, "Don't choke him, don't choke him, don't choke him." Now you say that when someone's choking him. Southall says the guy who was choking him was the guy that you saw in that ridiculous fighting stance in the blue and white shirt, going like this. He apparently had hit him several times already and was choking him when he was on the ground. That's what Southall says. You see the tape for yourself on what happened afterwards. Now, Southall said that when he was down there and all these people were attacking him at the same time, it felt, quote, like a lynch mob. Okay? He said that some had said the N-word, some called him a monkey. Now, we have the woman saying don't choke him on tape, otherwise it's the camera in the beginning was too far away and you couldn't hear what the crowd was saying. So that's Southall's version of how it went down. Now, as they're doing all these terrible things, you know what some of the guys there chanting were? They were chanting, "All lives matter." As they're showing enormous disregard for this guy's life. Okay, now, he says he was punched in the neck, punched in the back of the head, choked, etc. They're choking a guy as they're chanting, "All lives matter." You want to talk about not getting, right? And here's a guy surrounded by white dudes in Alabama, a black guy. He says his grandparents were on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in that famous march, right? You know, Selma, Alabama. Okay, it's the same state, Alabama. There they are in Birmingham. They're beating the guy down, chanting "All lives matter" as they choke him. Here we are, man. We're right back in the soup. So, Sean Edwards, meanwhile, is the local authorities. I'm sure the local authorities in Alabama will be very much on his side. I mean, the guy, you saw it on tape, clearly assaulted, right? I mean, how many people are the cops bringing in now? 3, 4 people. Now, they kicked him out. I understand when you remove a guy who is being disruptive. Did they then go back in and get the guys who assaulted him? Of course not. Sean Edwards, who's the Birmingham police lieutenant, says, "Oh man, our officers didn't see the beating. I have the tape. I saw the beating. You just saw the beating. They didn't see it." He says, quote, and now this is going after the victim, "I would be a little cautious with Mercutio Southall. He's been an agitator from day one. Mercutio is always the agitator." Oh, we're right back there, man. That's exactly what they said during the Civil Rights Movement. We don't want these agitators around here. We don't want those northern agitators, they used to say. So instead of helping the victim, they turn around and call him the agitator. And so far, from the looks of it, no attempt to arrest anyone who clearly assaulted him. How long is this going to go? How much further is this going to go? Now, in the beginning, the Trump campaign said, "Oh, no, we don't condone any violence." And then Trump went on TV and said, "Nah, not really. I kind of do condone it. Here, watch."
And that was I don't know, you say roughed up. He was so obnoxious and so loud. He was screaming. I had 10,000 people in the room yesterday, 10,000 people. And this guy started screaming by himself. And I don't know, rough up? Maybe he should have been roughed up because it was absolutely disgusting what he was doing. This was not handled the way Bernie Sanders handled his problem, I will tell you. But I have a lot of fans, and they were not happy about it.
He's bragging about it. I have a lot of fans, and they weren't happy about the protester. And maybe he got roughed up. Here, you heard it for yourself, but I'll quote you again. Maybe he should have been roughed up. He was discussing what he was doing. The guys chanting "All Lives Matter" as they kick the crap out of this guy is not disgusting. Those are his fans who are just sticking up for him. And any protester should know that they will be physically assaulted at a Donald Trump event. Yeah, this is exactly how fascism begins. So they brook no dissent, and the answer will be physical and it'll be violent. And already the authorities are like, "Oh, what? They didn't arrest the guy who attacked the Latino guy. They didn't arrest the spitter. They didn't arrest any of the guys in Alabama. So it's open season. You want to try to protest Donald Trump? Imagine if this guy's president. And he's having his fans beat up anyone who protests the president. Is this America? Look at what we've become. He has a comfortable lead in the Republican race. One more quote from Southwell. He says, I got punched in the face, I got punched in the neck, I got kicked in the chest, kicked in the stomach. Somebody stepped on my hand, okay? And like I said, he said he was choked too. And Trump says, I got fans who are doing that. He brags about it on TV. You see, Trump isn't leading in the Republican primaries despite this. He's leading because of this. His lead will not go down. It'll go up from now on, okay? And this is not concerning because it is one rogue candidate. And we're worried about what one guy thinks. We're worried because it is representative. He's leading. He's number one among the Republicans. Republican voters look at that. They don't view that as a problem. They view it as the solution. There's something deeply wrong with this country, and certainly with one particular party in this country that's headed down a dark, dark path. Okay. JR, do you want to add anything to that? No? Okay. Now let's go. I got two more on that, believe it or not. That's the main story. But let's go to his supporters now. His fans, as it were. There's a guy named Robert Kiger. He runs a super PAC for Donald Trump. He actually interviewed me at Politicon. You can check out that interview. At the time, he was just asking me questions. He seemed harmless. Well, now I've seen him on CNN with Carol Costello talking about how Donald Trump supporters beat up a black activist at a rally in Birmingham, Alabama. And not only did he excuse it, he seemed to justify it, at the very least, but Donald Trump's justifying it. So I guess that's not surprising that his super PAC man would also be backing it up. But then he said something that went, I think, way over the top, but he doesn't even realize it. Let's watch.
So your thoughts on what happened over the weekend?
From my perspective, I'm sick and tired of the Black Lives Matter thing. I think it's a farce. I think they're just there to disrupt. If
what do you think is a
farce? If they really care about Black lives, they need to pick up a banner and go to the south side of Chicago, where Black lives are being slaughtered on a daily basis. If they really care about the African American community, get up there and do something about it.
So they don't have the right to protest at a Trump rally?
Well, no, they don't, really. Nobody needs
America.
Look, I wouldn't go into a black church and start screaming "White Lives Matter." People are trying to.
Would you be afraid that they would beat you up?
People. Yeah, I know I'd get beat up. And let me tell you, people are trying
in a black church.
People are trying. I'm sure if I started disrupting their sermon and was obnoxious as this guy apparently was, yeah, I would probably be afraid I might get at least thrown out and roughed up. Yeah.
Did you miss what the members in South Carolina of that church said about the man who opened fire inside of a church?
Excuse me?
Never mind. I won't go there. So,
well, first of all, you should have gone there. There was a black church that a white person was welcome into down in South Carolina, and he opened fire on them, and he killed 9 of them. And even afterwards, they talked about forgiveness for him and his family. So my guess is no, they're not the violent ones. They're not going to rough you up. Okay, put aside what happened in South Carolina. Look at this guy's assumption. This is some portion of our voters in America. They think that if you went to a black church, they'd assault you in the church. Oh, there's a white guy. Oh, he said something I don't like. Let's go beat him up. Let's rough him up. That's mental. That's unbelievable that he thinks that. But they do. They're so afraid of black people. It's amazing. You remember the time Bill O'Reilly was talking about when he went to dinner in Harlem with Al Sharpton, and he said, oh my God, they were actually polite and civil in a restaurant. It's a famous restaurant in Harlem. He said, there was nobody saying, get me an iced tea, mother effer. This is their view of black people. They think that they're like, you go to a restaurant and they're all yelling at mother effer. You go to a black church and they're gonna rough you up and beat you up. Which white person has gotten beat up at a black church in America? And look at this projection. And I mean, look, it's been happening for time immemorial, right? They bring people chained up, they enslave them, they rape, kill, torture, list goes on, and then they go, they're the violent ones. Watch out for the savages. The black man has a tendency towards violence. After subjecting them to hundreds of years of slavery, people have the audacity to say black men have a tendency towards violence. This guy, in this particular case, in today's America, they kicked the crap out of a black guy at a Trump rally, and he goes, well, you know how violent and dangerous the black guys are. I mean, if I went to a black church, not a black gang, not a black church, I'd get beat up. What are you guys so afraid of? You're the one in power. Trump says he's a multi-billionaire. He has $10 billion. You live in West Palm Beach. You wear a bow tie. Whatever you do. I got news for you. You're in charge. The black guys getting beat up are not in charge. Maybe that's what you're afraid of. You're used to holding your power and exercising it over others and keeping them down. And you think, well, if they had the power, of course they would do likewise, right? They beat me down. I've been beating them down all this time. They would do likewise, right? Apparently not. No. You're just projecting your feelings onto them. He's going to continue.
Look, Donald Trump has been, I went to the Trump rally in Miami. Donald Trump has been very polite with these people. He had some disruptors in Miami, and he said, please don't hurt them, just make them leave, get them out of here, but don't hurt them. So, look, I mean, enough is enough. We're trying to elect a president of the United States here. These guys are just doing this purposely to disrupt. They don't really have a cause they're trying to bring to the forefront. I don't think they really care. If they did, they'd go to Baltimore, or they'd go to Chicago. Certainly, once again, being in Birmingham, Alabama, going in and disrupting that thing, that's no place for the Black Lives Matter to try to bring their issues to the forefront.
Protesting a guy who's speaking hatefully against minorities in this country in Alabama is not the right place to protest. It almost sounds like the perfect place to protest, doesn't it? But he says, no, enough is enough. You've already spoken out too much. We've heard enough from these people, okay? You know what the real problem is? Black people in South Side of Chicago and in Baltimore. So go talk to black people about not hurting black people. We're used to hurting them, and we don't want to hear from you anymore, okay? Know your role. And if you don't bow your head, this is what you're going to get. And that's that. And well, now we know. This is the guy leading Trump's super PAC, and Trump himself said, yeah, hey, my fans, they roughed him up. And you know, he was disgusting, so he had to come. This is where we are, man. This is where we are. Jesus. Okay. All right. One more quick reference to Trump here, and we'll be done with that. And I have one story about CNN. So after the ugliness in Alabama, when Trump supporters beat up a black protester, Trump decided that he was going to tweet out something that shows the real problem is black people. So he tweeted out this: USA Crime Statistics 2015. Year's not over. I don't know where they compile that from. We'll get to that in a second. It has a black guy holding a gun sideways with a mask on. And it says, blacks killed by whites, 2%, blacks killed by police, 1%, whites killed by police, 3%, whites killed by whites, 16%, whites killed by blacks, 81%, blacks killed by blacks, 97%. Okay. Here's a couple of problems with that. It is entirely made up. Not remotely true. Did Donald Trump bother to check that? No. He's running for president. Fact checking. What name so? No interest in checking any facts. I mean, on the face of it, you go, really? Whites killed by blacks? Over 80%? Over 80% of the white people are killed by blacks that are killed? I mean, doesn't that make you go, really? No, it doesn't. For Trump, he goes, oh yeah, of course. It's all the blacks killing us, man. The problem is blacks. They kill the black people, they kill the white people. I'm going to retweet that, right? So that statistic was from the non-existent, and it says it on the bottom, Crime Statistics Bureau, San Francisco. No such organization exists. Those statistics are completely made up, out of whole cloth. In fact, the opposite is true, and it's unsurprising. Over 80% of whites are killed by other whites, okay? And it's not because white people are particularly bad. Of course not. It's because white people know more white people. A lot of the killings happen inside a family, inside acquaintances, right? White people know white people, so they kill each other, right? And so that's not surprising. Those are the real numbers. Instead, I mean, look at how I don't know why you'd pause at calling it racist, but you want to talk about racial baiting to tell white people after they got done beating up a black guy at your rally, tell them, oh yeah, it's the blacks that are killing you. I mean, are you going to do something about that? But they were already doing something about it in your rallies. They were already assaulting a Latino guy, a black guy. We've shown all the tape. So reporters trying to figure out where in the world did they come up with this made-up statistic. They went and tried to find it. Obviously, this organization doesn't exist. This whole thing's made up, right? So they traced it back to an original tweet. You know who sent the original tweet? A neo-Nazi group. Okay, now, that doesn't mean Trump knew that it was from a neo-Nazi group. I would be shocked if he knew, right? I'm not saying he is a neo-Nazi, wants to send, purposely sends around neo-Nazi propaganda, okay? Well, it is interesting that he's like-minded. Like, he sees neo-Nazi propaganda and he doesn't go, oh, that's weird. That doesn't seem right. He looks at it and goes, nailed it! And sends it around. This is the guy who could be president of the United States. He's leading in the Republican race. I keep saying it because it's amazing. He's leading among the Republicans by a comfortable margin. According to the last Reuters poll, he's up by 17 points. Second closest is Ben Carson, way in the distance, okay? And here's a guy who thinks that 80% of whites in the country are killed by blacks. Now, if he believes that, what policy positions would he implement as president? A frightful, frightful thought. And it's not that remote a possibility. I can see it right there. Might be in the distance, but that train is headed right towards us. Okay, last story for you guys in the first hour. First hour. He says an hour and 50 minutes into the show. Okay. Last week we had an interesting situation. Elise Labonte is a reporter for CNN, and after there was a vote on the refugee situation, she tweeted out, House passes bill that could limit Syrian refugees. Statue of Liberty bows head in anguish. Now, look, she didn't say she was for the Democrats. She didn't say she was agree with Obama's position, but you can tell. I mean, she's saying the Statue of Liberty bows head. That's actually not in dispute because the Statue of Liberty, not a real person, but has a very clear plaque on it that says, give me your poor, your wretched refuse of the world, and I'll give them shelter. I'll give them a golden door. So if you are refusing the refugees that the Statue of Liberty says it welcomes, well, it is against the ideal of the Statue of Liberty. That is true. But it seems to indicate a certain position that she thinks that, you know, again, I struggle because it's a fact of the statue. It says that on the Statue of Liberty, so you can't make the counter argument that the Statue of Liberty would, the people who gave it to us, the people who put that plaque up, what it stands for would be against refugees. That's the whole point of the Statue of Liberty, is to be pro-refugees and immigrants that are coming in. Okay. Anyway, but you can still tell. You can still tell that she didn't agree with the vote. Okay, she's a reporter. So CNN is very upset about this. A bias. We won't let that kind of liberal bias in here, okay? So they suspend her for a couple of weeks. Now, Glenn Greenwald goes on Brian Stelter's program, Reliable Sources, on CNN over the weekend, and he engages in a debate on this issue and would like to point out the hypocrisy of what CNN is doing. Now, I want to show you that debate, and then I'll back it up with video examples from CNN. So let's watch.
Brian, you have had CNN, not you personally, but CNN has had John Brennan, multiple tapes of him over and over, has had former CIA Jim Woolsey who has come on, zero pushback, zero questioning. A reporter stood up in President Obama's press conference and said, why can't we take these bastards out, essentially pushing the president towards war in Syria. This is the kind of opinionating that comes forth from CNN all the time.
Let's talk about that quote.
Never punish. You're allowed to demonize Muslims.
What I thought Acosta was doing, and I want to hear your take, was trying to express what folks in America are feeling and thinking right now, that dissatisfaction with the president's response to ISIS. Is it not appropriate for the press to hold the president, even a Democratic, even a liberal president, accountable in that way?
I actually think that it's totally appropriate for the CNN host with Yasser Yaloudi to express their repugnant opinions. I think it's appropriate for Jim Acosta to voice what American people are saying. But I also think it's appropriate for Elise Labat to go onto Twitter and to speak critically in the mildest way about the U.S. Congress and stand up for the most marginalized people, Syrian refugees.
So you're saying all opinions. Let's hear all the opinions.
Elise Labat gets punished, but the two CNN anchors and Jim Acosta and all kinds of CNN anchors who speak critically of Muslims aren't punished. And the message that's sent is you're free to stoke anti-Muslim animosity in the United States, but what you're not free to do is defend Muslims. And
I hear what you're saying. I personally haven't heard anti-Muslim rhetoric on this network in the way you're describing.
I think it's great that Christiane Amanpour can go on CNN all the time and demand that President Obama intervene in Syria, that he attack ISIS with ground troops, that she expresses whatever opinions she wants. That, to me, is journalism, is criticizing politicians. That's why Elise did nothing wrong as well. And the fact that CNN singled her out and punished her doesn't show that objectivity is required of CNN reporters. It shows that when you want more war, when you want to stigmatize Muslims, but defending Muslims is not allowed. I think that's what that signal is sent.
I don't think that's true about Christiane. But it's different when you're a correspondent in Washington who's actively covering something like the refugee debate.
So let's break this down because there's two different issues here, right? So Glenn mentions the anti-Muslim rhetoric that he hears on CNN from time to time. Now, there was an interview very recently after the Paris attacks where two CNN anchors asked a Muslim leader in Europe whether he would basically apologize for what ISIS did. Now, it seemed weird. He said, what are you talking about? Muslims were killed in the attack? What would Muslim leaders in Europe that are peaceful have anything to do with the ISIS, attacks? And it's like asking anytime there's a white shooter in America for a random church leader to go and apologize, or a random white leader, whatever that might be, to go apologize. They did it. They did it on CNN. Okay, you say, oh well, I don't know about that. How about Don Lemon? He had a Muslim civil rights leader here in America, and listen to what he says at the end of the interview.
Do you have a problem with these cartoons, the way they depict the Prophet Muhammad?
No, not at all. And I think that if you surveyed the vast majority of Muslims around the world, they would certainly say that the killing of innocent civilians is not only murder, but it's also against any normative mainstream teachings of Islam. And
their words and what you're saying, no, that's not always the reality of what many people think about Islam.
Yeah, but Don, it's important to not conflate the actions of a very few to a population of 1.7 billion people, which represents 20% of the world's population.
Newsweek found back in August that 16% of French citizens support ISIS. Would you describe those who support ISIS as Islamic extremists?
Well, they are. That ideology, I don't think that would mean that they would justify the killing of innocent civilians or murdering people on the streets.
But I just want to get more specific. Again, in August, 16% of French citizens support ISIS. Would you describe those who support ISIS as Islamic extremists? Do you support ISIS?
Wait, did you just ask if I support ISIS?
That's a human rights lawyer that he's talking to. But you see how that jump happened? Some radical Muslims did a violent attack. Well, I showed you a poll where other people generally agree with that group, okay, that number is way too high, and then here's a human rights lawyer who's Muslim, I jump to, hey, do you support ISIS? I mean, you're a Muslim. Why else would he ask him? Would he have asked him if he was Christian? Probably not, right? So that's on CNN right there. So, I mean, there's a number of examples. There's two of them right there. The interview right after the Paris attacks, this interview right there. Human rights lawyer, you're Muslim. Do you support terrorists? Okay, all right. Now, the second issue is, and I think actually, to be honest, a much more important issue, which is if you hold liberal positions, that's bias, and you'll be suspended. But if you support pro-war positions, well, no, there'll never be any consequences for that. So now there's smaller examples here. Jim Acosta saying, what are you going to do about these bastards in reference to the ISIS attack in Paris when he asked the president. Now, they are bastards, so that's not that controversial, but it seemed to implicate that you need to do something that is more military, because the president was just talking about putting in more ground troops does not make sense, okay? So, but you could say, hey, that's subtle. I don't count that one. Okay. But then Glenn points out, you have these former CIA directors who come on here and who say, oh, we got to have more ground forces, we got to do more war, we got to do more bombing. There's just a report in the New York Times today about the Inspector General of the Pentagon saying that intelligence analysts say that the airstrikes and further military campaigns are not working in defeating ISIS. But the CIA directors, former CIA directors, come on, Jim Woolsey, who's an enormous neoconservative, loved the Iraq war, pushed for it aggressively, pushing for a war with Iran, comes out and says, oh yeah, the only answer is violence and more war and bombings, and we got to be tough, and we got to do this, and we got to do that. Is there any pushback on that? No, CNN anchors are like, oh, have at it, Oz. No challenge of that whatsoever. Okay, now, finally, let's go to Christiane Amanpour, because Stelter there said, hey, I don't think that's what Christiane did. That's interesting, because she's on tape. So let's see if she has an opinion on whether the president should do more ground forces, ground troops, which he specifically said in the speech before she came out and said these comments on CNN. He said he was not for ground troops. And then Amanpour said this.
He said something that was pretty incredible, according to many of the military experts here and around the world who I've spoken to, that our strategy is working. People do not believe that to be the case. The only strategy that's working is the strategy that he tends to dismiss, and that's the ground troop strategy. Sinjar, Tikrit, Kobani, those are the only ISIS strongholds that have been taken back by a combination of American intelligence and air power and local ground forces, whether they're Iranian-backed militias in Tikrit, whether they're Kurdish, Peshmerga and other Kurdish forces in Sinjar and in Kobani. This is a fact.
When Elise Labit comes out and says the Statue of Liberty would be in favor of taking in refugees, a unbelievable liberal bias. You got to get her up there right now. Now, the president comes out and says, we're not going to do ground troops. Amanpour comes out and says, the only thing that can work is ground troops. Well, that seems to be a political opinion, doesn't it? No, she said, it's a fact. Her opinion is a fact, right? Did she get suspended? I didn't see the suspension. Now, I'll tell you why I laugh at that opinion. First of all, we did ground troops in Iraq. How did that turn out? Did that work out great? No. ISIS arose out of that. So what happened to the fact that ground troops work? That's what caused the mess in the first place. Did I hear that on CNN? No, I didn't. I heard somebody come out here and say they talked to military experts. Oh, surprisingly, military experts are in favor of further military action. But that's not an opinion. That's just the military experts who are always right, according to CNN, saying the only answer is ground troops. And did you notice the little rhetorical trick she did? It's like the old days in the lead up to the Iraq War. 9/11, Saddam Hussein. 9/11, Saddam Hussein. I didn't say Saddam Hussein did 9/11. I just mentioned them in the same sentence. And then right before the war, because the media did such an abhorrent job of telling the American people the truth, 70% of Americans believe that Saddam Hussein had personally attacked us on 9/11. Well, that was CNN's failure. That was the mainstream media's failure, and they're doing it again. Amanpour says ground troops, who were actually Kurdish Peshmerga and other troops, did it, and hence the only answer as a fact is ground troops. But those weren't American ground troops. Those were not American ground troops. And then she'll turn around and say, I didn't say that. I didn't say American ground troops. I said the opposite. I said the only answer is ground troops. It's Peshmerga and other people that are not Americans. Anyway, what? That's not an opinion. If you have a conservative opinion, you get applauded, you get rewarded, you get promoted. If you have even a smidgen of a progressive opinion, or actually, if you're representing the Statue of Liberty, an American opinion, a core American ideal, bias, you're removed from the air. What does that do? It sends a message. Don't you ever have a progressive opinion on CNN or any of the mainstream media. You will be kicked out. But if you have an opposite opinion, have at it, Hoss. We'll say, oh, it's cherry picking, it's this, it's that. We'll excuse it. There'll never be any consequences. If you do war propaganda on CNN, you will be celebrated as an expert, as a correspondent, as Amanpour is, right? Or their top correspondent, and you will be shown all the respect in the world. This is how our media lies us into wars. If you don't like it, that's not my issue, that's your issue, because you're the one doing it. Young Turks. Alright, back on the Young Turks, checking out with you guys in the second hour. Okay. Now, let me do some tweets for you guys, and then we've got plenty of stories in this hour. Screet Gill had a couple of great tweets. First, Vitter goes down, and he paid $150 to do that. Chris Bradshaw writes in, TYT needs to bring back the elbow from the sky graphic. God, I missed that. Chris, real quick note there. So we used to run that graphic back in the current days, right? When we were on current television. And the reason why we don't have that anymore is it involves animation. And animation is harder to do. It takes more man hours, and we don't have the money for it. So, become a member. TYTnetwork.com/subscribe. Okay, help support the show. These are different things that we can do with money that we, at this point, don't have. Okay, Yeshua writes in, real Donald Trump is doing America a favor by showing the true face of the Republican Party in pure and raw form. Yeah, that's if they were listening, Yeshua. The press isn't saying it's all the Republicans, even though he's winning. They're making more excuses for it. Screet Gill says, you know who else was an agitator? Jesus Christ, the American revolutionaries, the suffragettes. Fuck off, Donald Trump. And then finally, the kitchen witch. Included a picture so that it's very convincing. I can't show you the picture here, but check it out. If you go to type in hashtag TYT Live, you'll see all the tweets with that hashtag. The kitchen witch writes in, tell me Trump's Super PAC man doesn't look like the melting Nazi from the Raiders of the Lost Ark. And if you see the picture, you're like, oh yeah! That doesn't mean he is a Nazi. That was a movie. Okay? All right. Casper, what do you got for us?
All right. First, a quick correction on a story that we did a month ago. About a month ago, we did a story about something that was reported as a study that wasn't actually a study. It was a survey, meaning that the results of that survey were probably not nationally representative or even accurate. So the story was that 1 in 3 vegetarians confess to eating meat when they get drunk. Now, 1 in 3 vegetarians in their non-scientific survey did that, but that's not to say that the methodology was correct or that it was a study. Obviously, a study is very different from a survey. So with that said, take that report with a grain of salt. I just wanted to make that correction. It does not mean that 1 in 3 vegetarians eats meat when they get drunk.
Okay, I'm going to be a little defensive here, because then people will say, oh, well, why didn't you guys do further investigation? Well, we go to multiple sources. That story bounced around the internet, not just the internet. It's not like we're taking tweets, right? And not checking it. To almost all the reputable media organizations. So if you say, why didn't you do your own study on vegetarians? I hear you, brother, but we don't have that kind of money either.
Right.
Right? So we do the best we can in double checking, triple checking, and that one got past everybody. But at least we're coming out and telling you that it was questionable.
Yeah, it was definitely questionable. And look, part of the reason why that kind of misinformation gets out there is because a lot of people annoyingly don't know the difference between a study and a survey, right? A survey does not mean that it's a scientific study. A scientific study is something that's peer-reviewed, and so doing a survey online doesn't mean that it's going to be representative of an entire, population of people or a subgroup.
Okay, one last small thing on that. The articles where we got it from the mainstream media sources changed the word from survey to study. So
yes, that's why
we didn't know. We thought it was a real study, right? But it wasn't. And so now that we found out, and by the way, one of you guys sent me that. So thank you for doing that. You help us become a better show and be as honest and transparent as we can with everybody. We bother to come out and correct things as soon as we know that that's the case. Thank you, guys.
Yes. All right, so let's get to the news. New statistics show that hate crimes against Muslims in Britain have increased 300% since the Paris terrorist attacks. Now, this is a report done by the government's working group on anti-Muslim hatred, seen by The Independent, and it shows a spike in Islamophobic hate crimes of more than 300% to 115 hate crimes in the week following the killings on November 13th in France. Most victims of the UK hate crimes were Muslim girls and women aged 14 to 45 in traditional Islamic dress. The perpetrators were mainly white males aged 15 to 35.
How very brave of them, because if you're a guy who's 15 to 35, bullying a young or middle-aged woman is really classy. That's how you fight back against the terrorists.
So a lot of the cases happened on public transportation. It doesn't surprise me that they're targeting Muslim women because, A, they're easy targets, and B, there's no denying that they're Muslim because they're wearing the headdress, right?
Yeah, and I want to be clear about this. So the 115 attacks in a week is a stunning number. It's actually, totally underestimated because a lot of people don't report it, right? And there's many reasons you wouldn't report it. You're intimidated by a guy who lives in your neighborhood, and you don't want to report him and get him more mad. Or it really bothered you, but it didn't rise to the point where you'd go tell the authorities about it, right? You were intimidated, but you just kept it to yourself. But it's not those people weren't killed, okay? It's not an equivalency, okay? They were often threatened and bullied in some of the ways that Anna will describe here. So we understand that. And we understand that it's not like they want to pick more on women, although, like Anna said, it is also a little easier. You're not going to get any, or likely you're not going to get as much pushback. You're going to be able to get away with it, right? But mainly it's because you can see they're Muslim because of the hijab.
Exactly.
Right?
So let me give you one case. And again, there were 115, but this is one of the cases that stood out to me. In one recent case in London, a young girl wearing a hijab was abused on the tube train. Ashley Powis described how the girl sitting opposite him was subjected to a racist rant from another passenger, a man. He got closer to her, and was reeling off abuse, calling her things like raghead, terrorist, scum, and saying her people murdered the victims of the Paris attacks. This is why it's so incredibly important to differentiate between Muslim fundamentalists and the vast majority of Muslims out there, okay? Because when you push this notion that, oh, their religious doctrine is evil, therefore they all must be watched, well then all of a sudden you're promoting this kind of Islamophobic behavior against completely innocent people who haven't done anything wrong.
And they didn't say all Muslims. I don't know why on God's green earth that happened. That man happened to interpret it as her people. They just said the ideology of Islam, which a lot of Muslims agree with, and he saw a person that was clearly Muslim and decided to, call her terrorist scum.
Right.
Look, they didn't say all Muslims. I don't know how he got that misinterpretation.
I know, I got it. The squeaky wheels are jerking off right now. Calm down. It's going to be okay. Let me go to the next one. When asked by the news why his sorry about that. Wrong graphic. What I wanted to say was, this is not surprising. This happens after every terrorist attack that happens in the Western country. And you have to be really careful with the way that you talk about these issues, the way you label people, the way you generalize about people. They're innocent, peaceful people that have nothing to do with this, and they're being targeted in the most violent ways right now. And this is just Britain. Wait till I get to the United States.
Not just against Muslims, against a lot of the communities. Black Lives Matter, Latinos, criminals and rapists. Not all of them. Not all of them. Right? Some people are fantastic. Right? But we're not going to let any. It's funny when it comes to policy, they don't make them. Then you got Mo Brooks. He's a congressman here in America, in Alabama. And he says, we shouldn't let any refugees in because you can't trust anybody from the East. And it's funny how he also lost the distinction between not all, because he wants to keep all of them, right? And then you got these guys. You got the Trump guys who are attacking the Latino homeless guy, saying, oh, go back to your own country.
Yeah.
They don't know that he's a citizen. They don't care. He's Latino.
Yeah.
They lost the distinction too. See, Trump didn't mean all Latinos, right? And in this case, you've got people attacking all over the UK, 115 in a week. And they're doing saying, you people, all of you, you're responsible. Funny how they lost that distinction. It's weird, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the United States, where cases of violence toward Muslims is also increasing. Recently, armed protesters in Texas wanted to confront Muslim mosque builders with their weapons. Let's take a quick look at the video and some details on what they are providing. All right, so again, this is in Texas, and the organization that's protesting this mosque with their weapons is known as the Bureau of American Islamic Relations. Sorry, that's wrong. Okay, it's Stop the name of the organization right now.
Stop Islam.
There we go. Stop the Islamic organization. And they went to the Islamic Center of Irving to protest it. Now, obviously, they did it in an intimidating way. They're carrying these huge weapons. They're trying to make a point. In fact, when asked by the news why the group was armed, organizer David Wright said the weapons were mostly for self-protection. Protection from what? You guys are going over there with your weapons. Then he added, but I'm not going to lie, we do want to show force without symptoms.
The other side doesn't have weapons.
And the other side's not showing force. They're not doing anything wrong. They're just normal Muslims going to the mosque that they pray at. That's it.
So this is the same Irving, Texas, where the young kid brought in a clock and the guy thought it was a bomb. They had the kid handcuffed, arrested, etc. Right? And then some people here in America supported that move, like Bill Maher. Thought it was a nice move of caution by the part of the authorities in Irving, Texas. I mean, he's a Muslim kid, and if a Muslim kid brings in a clock that that doesn't look like a clock. I mean, you never know, right?
No, you just
Better
gotta
safe
watch.
than sorry. And so these guys show up with weapons to a mosque. Well, does the mosque have any weapons? Well, first of all, they'd have every right to have a weapon. It's Texas, right? And they're American citizens just like the other guys. They'd have all the right in the world. But they don't have any weapons. But, hey, better safe than sorry. You know how Muslims are. They have an ideology of Islam that is so dangerous. Now, Bill Maher and others didn't say all Muslims. But somehow, the guys that showed up with weapons thought all Muslims. Golly gee, they lost that distinction. Because I thought that they had gotten all the intellectual points about, you don't want to profile Muslims, Anna. You want to do anti-profiling of people who don't look Muslim, okay? See, when you do that intellectual distinction, okay, yeah, by the way, one of the dumbest points ever, okay, anti-profiling. So imagine a room with kids with brown eyes and blue eyes. He said, I'm not profiling the kids with brown eyes. I'm just anti-profiling the kids with blue eyes. Wow, that's really smart. Okay, so, but somehow all those really clever little tricks were lost on the people who showed up with weaponry, okay? So now, if those idiots had showed up when there was an actual hostilities, okay, yes. When they're firing, those are the bad guys. I know it's really hard because pseudo-intellectuals don't do nuance, right? So they think, I don't know, don't they all? Not all. Most, some. Don't they believe the same thing? I can't tell, right? See, the ones that are doing the killings are the bad guys, right? The ones sitting peacefully at a mosque in Irving, Texas are not bad guys. They didn't kill anyone. You shouldn't show up at their doorstep with heavy artillery.
Yeah. Well, look, this story is obviously very different, but there's a similar theme. It made me think of George Zimmerman and how, he's the one who provoked Trayvon Martin. Mm-hmm. So thankfully, thank God, in this situation, these guys weren't able to provoke any type of violent interaction. Cops showed up immediately. They talked to the members of the mosque, and they told them, look, whatever you do, don't interact, ignore them. We just don't want more trouble. And that's what they did. And so it didn't escalate into a violent situation. But it reminded me of the Trayvon Martin story because George Zimmerman was the one who was out looking for trouble. He was the one stalking this innocent black kid who was just walking through a neighborhood completely unarmed, not causing any trouble whatsoever. So in this case, the perceived threat is the Muslims, and so we have to provoke them with our weapons. In the George Zimmerman case, the perceived threat was the black kid, and he provoked him with the weapons. Thankfully, this case didn't end up in violence.
Well, look at the dangers that stereotypes create, right? So in the case of Trayvon Martin, the cops show up, there's a dead kid on the ground, and even though he was killed and he had no weapon on him, they do a toxicology report on him. They do a criminal background check on him, not the guy who shot him. Because they look at it and go, it's a black kid, we make sure you profile him, right? Okay, or maybe anti-profile him, I'm not sure. Okay, so now in this case, if, God forbid, one of the guys who are Muslim in that mosque showed up because he's from Texas and said, well, I want to defend myself. You know how Texans are, right? And showed up with a gun, which he has every right to, and then they opened fire on him. Who do you think they do the toxicology report on, the criminal background check on, right? To Anna's point, you antagonize. Right. You show up with a show of force. Because one of the things they want to have people do, these guys in particular, is they want you to know your role. Mm-hmm. You don't get to have a weapon in Texas if you're Muslim. Now, that should be your Second Amendment rights that they theoretically are totally in favor of, right? But you don't get to have one. I get to have one. And I get to use show of force. And I get to intimidate you. Know your role, boy. Okay? So, now, what are you supposed to do? The cops are right. You can't tell the Muslims, okay, you have your Second Amendment rights too. You can also show force. Don't do that, okay? It's a really bad idea. But then, the guys who are purposely jerks, again, these specific guys, right? They win. Because they get to intimidate you. Because they have the weapons, and they get to bully you. If, God forbid, you were to do likewise. I mean, imagine the massacre that breaks out. Yeah. Right? And then who asks questions about, what do you think the assumptions are going to be? Again, unrelated case, today in the news, Trump rally, black rights activist goes in, they kick the crap out of him. The sheriff, the local cop, comes out and says, Oh, that guy's an agitator. Okay? Hey, did you go to arrest the guys on tape assaulting him? Nope. Didn't arrest them. You see, you got to know your role, okay? And now, how do you know what your role is? Who built the stereotypes in the first place? Oh, nobody. They just magically appeared. I don't know where they came from.
All right, so one final story for you guys, related to this topic. A Muslim woman in Cincinnati says that a person attempted to run her over after saying anti-Muslim things to her, saying Islamophobic things to her. Now, it's a 22-year-old by the name of Haneen Jazim, and she said, the 22-year-old student said, the driver started honking his horn, cursing, and calling her a terrorist as she crossed the street, and then he drove straight toward her and didn't stop. 3 people walking in front of her grabbed her and pulled her onto the sidewalk just before the car struck her. So he got away before she could get the license plate information. But she's speaking out against this now because she feels unsafe in her own country because of what people believe about her just because she's Muslim.
To be fair, though, as the guy was driving away, he yelled out, "Not all Muslims!" Oh, he thought all Muslims. That's weird. I don't know why he lost that distinction. They were so clear about it. Yeah. If you read every book of the pseudo-intellectuals, they would outline for you exactly, no, I mean, most Muslims according to polls, but not all Muslims. Weird, he lost that distinction. That strand was right there. He was going to anti-profile her as he was running her over, but then oh gosh, damn it, he forgot, and he thought for a second maybe all Muslims, maybe that I should run over this 22-year-old girl. Okay. And Trump too, by the way. He didn't say all Latinos are criminals or rapists. He didn't say all black rights activists should be beat down. He just said that guy had it coming, right? And not all Muslims should be kept out, except all Muslims should be kept out.
All right. Should we move on? Take a break?
I can keep going all night.
No, I'm ready to go. Move on. Yeah. You know what? Let's not take a break. I want to get through these stories, so let's go ahead and move on to the next thing. All right. A religious leader in India is hoping for a machine that will scan women to make sure they're pure if they ever want to step foot in his Hindu temple. Now, this is Prayar Shalak. I'm not going to try to say his name. It's hard to say, but it's right there. You can read it for yourself. There's the classy gentleman right there with the mustache. He doesn't like when women are menstruating. He feels that it's dirty and icky. So here's what he has to say to the press about it. Menstruating women are considered unclean and impure by temple authorities. Okay, that's not his quote, but to that point, he says, women will be permitted to the temple after the invention of a machine which can scan and judge their purity.
I am looking forward to that machine.
He continues to say, a time will come when people will ask if all women should be disallowed from entering the temple throughout the year. These days, there are machines that can scan bodies and check for weapons. Okay, there will be a day when a machine is invented to scan if it is the right time, not menstruating, for a woman to enter the temple. When the machine is invented, we will talk about letting women inside.
Is he not merciful? Okay, see, when that day comes, then if you're clean, Anna, not if you're dirty,
right.
Okay, he'll let you in his beloved temple.
So, it's funny because as a woman, when it comes to the issue of menstruation, you can't really win, right? So if you're in the fertile years and you're menstruating, then you're icky. There's something really wrong and nasty about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then when you go through menopause and you're not menstruating anymore, then you're extra icky because you're old. You can't have babies anymore. So you're kind of a throwaway. I mean, this guy's a freaking clown. And when you think about all the issues that India's having right now with rape and the lack of prosecutions involved in these rape cases, it's no surprise that clowns like this have these types of ideas about women who are menstruating. By the way, what kind of creeper, obsesses over whether or not a woman's menstruating?
So now, look, let's be fair, okay? He's a fundamentalist, and the fundamentalists take their text literally, right? And this is why we speak out against fundamentalism, right? So, in their texts, what he says is right. Okay. Now people get really mad and say, "No, Hinduism is a great religion." No, it is. but like all religions, it's wildly contradictory. On the one side, it'll say something great and wonderful and help the needy and yada yada, like almost all religions do. And on the other side, it'll say, watch out for the menstruating women. And they're not alone. The Bible says the same thing.
Yeah.
Old Testament's got rules to no end about menstruation, right? And so don't let them sprinkle the goat's blood throughout the temple, but don't let the unclean women into the temple.
Yep.
And this is a common throughout so many religions: Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and the list goes on and on, right? So for him, he looks at it and goes, well, that's what my religion says, right? Now, there are two problems with that. Number one, don't believe the religion. That's why we're atheists. The texts are not true. The Quran is not true. The Bible is not true. And the Hindu texts, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Rig Vedas, they're not true. They're not true. They're not facts.
Right.
Okay? So when you go and it goes, well, it does say the thing about the menstruation and not letting the women in. What are you going to do? I got an idea. Don't believe the religion. Okay. Now, it doesn't mean because this fundamentalist idiot is wrong in policy in not letting women into the temple that we should hate all Hindus or majority or most Hindus. Anyway, but I did want to point out Ravi Shankar, who's a poet and activist, who made a great point about this, which is the second and I would say even more important point. He said, and it goes to the hypocrisy of what they do. There could also be a machine that scans and finds out whether men have led a celibate, teetotaler, vegetarian life for 41 days before entering the temple. Now, the reason he says that is because those are also rules in that text, okay? So, do they scan for that? No, they don't.
Yeah, they pick and choose. They pick and choose, which goes to the point I want to make about women who are religious. Why? I don't understand it. Why would you want to go to that temple? Like, if someone told me, we're not going to let you in that temple because you're menstruating, or we're not going to let you in that temple because you like to have a good time, with your man. Like, I'd be like, well, fuck you and your temple. I don't give a shit about your temple. Like, what's the worst that could happen to me? That I don't believe in your voodoo? I don't give a shit, right? But I know that people are forced into religions like this. They're born into it. They've been indoctrinated. They've bought the propaganda and the hype. And unfortunately, they feel like, oh my God, if I'm not allowed in the temple, this is a bad thing. But ladies, if any of you are part of this fundamentalist religion or fundamentalist interpretation of the Hindu religion, and you're affected by this in any way, shape, or form, I would like to tell you, go write it and have a good time, okay?
I was going to go a little different. It's not true. You can let it go. You're going to be at peace. It's going to be wonderful. There's no dude with an elephant's head. And by the way, if you believe in the Bible, there's no seven-headed dragon, okay? If you believe in the Quran, there was no spider that was a giant spider that protected Muhammad. All these things are fables. They're myths, okay? So understand that the fundamentalists who purvey those myths have a purpose in mind. They ignore the parts that would be problematic for them. Ignore them whole cloth. All the things, the rules that apply to men, don't care, not going to apply them, right? When it comes to women, you're banned. You're banned. Oh, it says it. It says it. What can I do? Nothing I can do, right? So my proposal is, and by the way, the Hindus, and there's over 1 billion of them, right? They don't know the specifics. They know they want to have faith, right? And if you challenge them and you ask them in a poll, do you believe there's a God with an elephant's head? They'll be like, yeah, I do. I do. Why? What do you know? You're saying I'm not Hindu? I believe it, right? Do they really think there's a dude with an elephant's head? They don't really believe that, okay? So, and you get brainwashed into it, and then you think, well, that's my role as a woman. I shouldn't go in the temple. The temple is so important. I've been told my whole life how important this temple is, but that I can't go in it because I should bow my head and know my role. Beating that brainwashing is enormously hard.
I know it's hard, and it's depressing because they're living their lives. They're very short lives, because life is short, and they're not enjoying it, and that's the part of it that bothers me the most. Like, they're being told over and over again to deny themselves the best things in life, including the D. And there's no reason why you should let religion control your personal life like that, okay? It's going to be okay. There's nothing more important than enjoying your life while you're here on this earth, okay? As long as you respect others and you don't harm others, and as long as you're responsible with what you do, enjoy life. Don't let this clown, look at this, can we put his picture back up again? Who would want to trust this guy? Who looks at this guy and says, yeah, you know what? I want him to control what I do with my sex life.
But I think Father Sarducci's got it on lockdown, right? Okay, so look, this is what I tell every religious person in the world, and this is our attempt at unbrainwashing, right? Don't trust us. Read the text, okay? Find out the facts. If you read the text, my guess is you'll go, really? I'm supposed to believe this, right? So don't take my word for it. Take your God's word for it. Look it up. You'll be shocked at what he believes. It isn't true. It isn't true. It's mythology. Okay, now let's take a break.
All right. Damn you!
What?
I wanted to be like bitter and mad at you.
I'll read two quick tweets for you guys. Smooth writes in, if any minority group protested like that in the U.S., they'd be arrested with the excuse of a fear of a mass shooting.
They'd be killed. They wouldn't be arrested.
Okay, so just real quick, let's go through those two thought experiments for a second, okay? Black Panthers show up heavily armed in front of a white church, okay, and say, hey, we're here to show force. What do you think happens? Come on. I mean, people talk about, like, oh, I don't believe in white privilege. Really? Okay, now let's turn it around. It's Barack Obama rally, largely African American crowd. That's not normally how it is, but let's say it is, right? And a white guy's protesting, and the black attendees of the rally. Sorry, I'm coughing too. And the black attendees of the rally kick the shit out of him in a circle while chanting. Okay.
Over.
Oh no, maybe they don't arrest the black people in that rally. Come on, who thinks that? Who thinks that? All right. Anyway, Max Richards writes, stop calling these armed anti-Muslim mobs protesters. It's like saying the lynch mobs were anti-black protesters. So now look, they didn't do the lynching, they didn't shoot anybody yet. But did they come to intimidate them? Yes. By the way, did they come to terrorize them? Yes. Right? So that's what this is about. What do you call people who are looking to terrorize other people? Oh, no, never mind. Okay. All right, let's go.
All right. Laura Parker is a staff writer at BuzzFeed, and recently she shared her story about what it's like to be a woman who cannot physically have sex. So she has a hard time dating, or has had a hard time dating in the past, because she was diagnosed with a condition that makes sexual intercourse very, very painful. Here's what she had to say about it. I was diagnosed with endometriosis, vulvodynia, and vaginismus, aka vagina problems. The diagnosis means a lot of things for my reproductive organs, but the main takeaway is that my genitals are often in a lot of pain, inside and out, and especially when penetrated. I may never have sex, and I will have pain in that area indefinitely. Now, I read about this story, and it honestly blew me away for a number of different reasons. Number one, how brave is she to write this, right? To share such a personal thing that she's going through. Because, first of all, this is the type of thing that people don't want to talk about. And I'm sure a lot of other women suffer from it, and they feel alone. So I love that she was brave and courageous enough to share her story. Also, think about how difficult it is to establish a relationship when sex is always emphasized so much in society. You know, like, not a lot of guys are going to be open-minded to that.
You know, and if I was single, I got to keep it 100. I don't think I'd have been open to it. Okay?
Wow.
Okay, so, and I don't mean to hate on her. I feel tremendous sympathy towards her. But if you're going to be realistic, right, if a woman says in your second date, hey, I can't ever have sexual activity with you because I have this condition, like, am I willing not to have sexual activity with someone indefinitely?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know a lot of guys who are, right?
So, I don't know if there's a male equivalent of what she's going through, but...
Oh, women would be far more understanding.
No, I disagree. I mean, it depends on the woman. It really depends on the women. I think there are women out there that would be open-minded to it, but I can only speak for myself. I don't think that I would be.
And look, so let me be clear about that. You see, and these are made-up numbers, so I'm putting that out there, right? But you might lose 90% of women. We get it, because human beings want to have sex, right?
Yeah, it's more than just sex. Like, it's the intimacy that comes along with sex. And she gets into other things that she does to be intimate, which we'll get to in a second.
Yeah. Okay, you might lose 90% of women, but I think 10% of women are wonderful human beings who might be open-minded to the intimacy parts of it, etc., right? Men, you'd lose 99% of.
Yeah, and that's what she's gone through. So let me share a little bit more of her story. She says, in the past 2 years, in the hopes of alleviating my pain, I've been to physical therapy, psychological therapy, and started support groups. I have slept with ice on my vagina, tried electric shock therapy and acupuncture, brought a heating pad with me everywhere I go, and used a dilator every morning before work. I have tried to cut out red meat, given up gluten, signed up for more yoga classes, and bought exclusively cotton underwear. I also started to date again. The pain and humiliation built even when a man flirtatiously touched my arm or complimented me in a suggestive way. I mean, think about living through that. And she would go on these dates, right? She went on Tinder. Terrible idea. Terrible idea for someone who's not going through this, but especially terrible for a woman who is going through this, because it's a hookup app. It's all about sex. She would go on these dates, and, you know, she'd get to know these guys, and as they were sharing, you know, intimate details about themselves, all she could think about was, oh my God, what do I do? Do I tell him now? Do I wait and tell him later? Yeah. And that's another thing that you're going to have to constantly grapple with, because you don't know. Like, are you being deceptive if you don't tell him right away? I don't know. It's a tough situation.
So I have enormous sympathy towards her, especially because in today's culture, right, we're more brazen about it being a hookup culture. I don't know that it's more of a hookup culture. There's a lot of studies on both sides of that issue, but we're certainly more open about it, right? So you go on Tinder, which is a major way that people date, right? And that's all guys are looking for, and at least they're being transparent about it, right? So when you say, hey, I can't do that, gone. I mean, swipe whichever direction you swipe not to do it, right? How old am I? Okay, so anyway, but I don't have her answer, and I feel terrible that I don't have her answer.
Well, here's what happened with her, and it makes me feel so happy, and hopefully it works out. But apparently, she had a former coworker that she kind of opened up to about the condition. And little by little, he kept like asking her some more questions about it, and telling her, that she's going to be okay. And then it seems like they fell in love. She doesn't go into detail about their relationship, but it seemed like they started to have a relationship, an emotional one, and then it progressed into a physical relationship. And it doesn't mean that they're having sex, but again, there's oral sex, there's other things that she can do that aren't painful, that aren't harmful to her. Yeah. So it sounds like she found someone, which makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
But the main takeaway for me, sorry to interrupt you, is there are so many things that we take for granted on a daily basis. So many things. Like the ability to love, the ability to have sex, the ability to be in a relationship. Just little things like that really add up and lead us to live fulfilled lives. And we take that for granted. I know I do.
Yeah. And so what I was going to say is a lot of people might think, hey, what does she get out of it? I mean, if she does things for the guy, right? It's supposed to be back and forth, but there is no back here. But you're missing the point.
There's a back and forth. She can have oral sex.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't say that she has oral sex, but it seems to me that she's just not having intercourse. Do you like my gesture?
Intercourse. Okay. I'm confused as to how her receiving anything could not be painful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Given her what she describes as her conditions, but even if she isn't receiving, that isn't the point.
Right.
The point is, human beings need intimacy. Even if you're not orgasming, that's not the only point, right? And so, if she can find a way to get that intimacy with someone, and he's happy enough with whatever the physical situation is, that's fantastic, and it's a testament to humanity that we got to that point. If in fact we did, right?
Exactly.
But I'm with you, Anna. Overall, the point is we have so many great things at our disposal, and we worry about trifling matters. Right?
I know. Like starting the show late, like that kind of stuff.
For me, for whatever reason, this story about Syrian refugees, even before this whole thing broke out, it was when that Muslim girl was killed in North Carolina, and I found out she used to do dental work for the Syrian refugees stationed in Turkey, right? And how they needed dental work because their teeth would get knocked out by rifle butts as people were trying to keep them out of the country, right? The little kids. That stuck with me, and I always think about those kids, and I think, I have a million things those kids don't have, right? So for me to be concerned about the trifling matters that bother us on a daily basis, it's almost gross.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So keep that in mind, all right?
All right. Let's move on to the next story. It's very rare to hear a story of a police official getting fired for doing something wrong. However, in Sanford, Florida, recently a police officer by the name of Andrew Ricks got fired because he went to a death metal concert, went on stage, and sang. Now, the death metal band is known as Vital Remains, and the name of the song that he was singing on stage was Let the Killing Begin. Okay? According to the police department, an incident of this nature erodes the thin fibers of trust which already exist between the community and the police, and it will not be tolerated within the Sanford Police Department. He got fired. He got fired because he went to a concert, went on stage, and started singing the song. Now, let me give you the lyrics so you can see how bad they are. Apparently, the lyrics are, his name is Jesus, he comes from Nazareth in Galilee. I imagine it's like, he comes from Nazareth. That's probably what it really sounds like. He is here now, charged with the crimes of sedition, sorcery, and blasphemy. Jesus of Nazareth, I abjure you by the living God. Okay, so those are some examples of the lyrics.
That doesn't seem so bad. By the living God! By the living God sounds bad.
Anyway, I just find it so interesting that of all the things that we've covered regarding police officials in the last 2 years, killings, just murdering unarmed people, shooting 12-year-olds within 2 seconds, things like that, no one gets fired. But this one cop goes to a death metal concert and enjoys himself, and it's like, how dare you? You are really, really putting the thin fibers of trust in jeopardy here.
Yeah. When the Sanford Police Department decided to not do a criminal background check on George Zimmerman, but to do one on Trayvon Martin,
that was okay.
That was a slightly bigger issue, right? So now, to be fair to the police officer, there aren't many songs by Vital Remains with good titles. Another one at the concert was Born to Rape the World. Okay, so I don't know that I want a cop singing that, but I certainly don't want him being fired over it. Look, because you know what it is? It's a song. It's not real. Okay? Now, this is the same thing Fox News does, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll take gangster rap and be like, oh, this is outrageous. Obama invited Common to the White House, and Common has said these things in his rap. Right? Well, this is death metal band, and yeah, it's outrageous, but it's a fantasy. It's like Al Pacino doesn't actually want you to say hello to his little friend. He's not going to actually murder you. He's an actor, right? Let the dude sing, man. I mean, if you're a cop and you're singing "Let the Killing Begin," I get that looks bad, right? Maybe you have a stern talking to with him, right? But you don't fire him over that. It's not real. It's a song.
Exactly. All right. Two major pharmaceutical companies are likely to merge, and it's probably because they want to evade taxes. Now, Pfizer is going to merge with Allergan, and according to reports, this is going to be disastrous because Allergan, which is the smaller pharmaceutical company, is based in Ireland with a lower corporate tax rate. And as a result, Pfizer wants to go ahead and merge with them and make it seem as though their home base is in Ireland, so they don't have to pay the U.S. corporate tax rate, which is also stunningly low. And they can go ahead and pay an even lower corporate tax rate or tax rate in Ireland. Now, this is also disastrous because it creates more of a monopoly, and when you have less competition, well, then all of a sudden pharmaceutical companies can go ahead and charge even more for non-generic versions of their drugs. So that's another issue. But the big problem here is them wanting to evade taxes, which is an ongoing issue that Congress pretends like it cares about, pretends like it wants to regulate, but never really does anything about it.
So there's these very well-known loopholes, like the double Dutch and the Irish sandwich, right? So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it does sound pretty seasonal too.
Yeah.
I got a double Dutch the other day at Starbucks. It's delicious. But what it is what multinational corporations robbing us. Now that sounds like a heavy charge, but why am I saying that? Because what they're doing is they're shifting the tax burden onto the average citizen of the different countries, including the United States. And I can show you charts that we have in the past on the Young Turks that show that when they don't pay their taxes, well, somebody's got to make up the federal revenue, because we have a giant defense department that likes to start wars from time to time, and they cost trillions of dollars. Somebody's got to pay that bill. And it's us, the citizens, right? And they've shifted the tax burden over the last 40 years onto us. And then they go and go, what? I just had a double Dutch and an Irish sandwich. What are you getting on me for, right? I merged with a company in Ireland. And then, of course, there's the P.O. boxes in the Cayman Islands, and it's trick after trick. Mitt Romney's done it, and all the major corporations are doing it. I don't dislike Pfizer or Apple that does this, right? I got an iPhone. It's not me. I don't hate companies. I don't hate their products. I'm just asking not to be robbed.
Yeah.
Right? For everybody to pay their fair share. And it doesn't mean like, I want your money. No, it means, hey, I pay taxes, you pay taxes. Can we be fair about this? And have you pay your share and I'll pay my share? Is that too much to ask for? And the reality is, of course, as you all know, they've bought all our politicians, so it is too much to ask for.
What's incredible is how low the effective corporate tax rate is in the United States, where some years huge corporations like Verizon, which of course is extremely profitable, don't pay anything in federal taxes, and on top of that, they get a federal tax return. Okay, so our money, our government pays them back.
They get a rebate.
Taxes. They get a rebate. It's incredible. Okay, so we already have an insanely low effective corporate tax rate. But it's still not good enough for companies like Pfizer. They still have to do this merger, so that it's called tax inversion, right? So they can go ahead and do this ridiculous maneuver and not have to pay their fair share.
They basically invert the taxes back on us. So that every once in a while, Republican politicians like Donald Trump, but among others, almost all of them on the Republican side, and some on the Democratic side, will come out and say, oh man, they got all this money outside the country because now they're an Irish company or an Cayman Islands company. They got all this money. Let's let them bring it back in so they can bring in jobs. Okay, great. They pay their taxes. They come back in. No. Let's do a tax holiday where they only pay 5%. 5%? That's the robbery, okay? Yep. And they're saying we're going to hold the money hostage until you meet our demands.
Yeah.
That's what this is about.
Yeah. Or you politicians and, I don't know, prevent mergers like this from happening, especially when you know that they're doing it to dodge taxes. You want to be an Ireland-based company? Then move your ass to Ireland completely. Don't have any offices here in the United States.
Yeah. By the way, libertarians will be like, no, free market, let anybody merge they want. You apparently didn't read Adam Smith. One of the things he warns about is monopolies, which destroy free markets. Okay. Sorry to do nuance. Okay. Not all? Okay. Just playing. Okay. I gotta go. We gotta go. Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.